Good afternoon, Chairman, board members. Today, just kind of wanted to run over the budget that you have approved for this project and give you an idea where we stand at this point and an expectation of where we expect to land when this project is delivered at the end of this project. As you're aware, is back in November of 2008, the board basically had an agenda before it to create the project budget here at $339,559,000. Within that dollar amount, the project team, based upon the needs known at that time and all, identified various components of the project budget, most important at that time being the construction piece at roughly $258.6 million. The rest of the money was broken out into various other categories within the project, and I can tell you at this point, as we'll see, is we're within all of the categories are within budget at this time. The next basic slide shows that as of June 30th, this project, we've spent $47 million on the project and the related pieces of it, with architectural engineering and construction being the most. This time, you know, as I said prior to this, there's no areas of the budget that we expect to have any difficulty with or any issues with of making it through for a completed project. And also, as you heard earlier, as of this date, we have authorized, or the board has authorized, 4 GMPs for this project. The 4 at this point total $112 million. We will be coming to you on 9/16/2009 with a 5th GMP for $109 million. And then at some point in December, we will be coming back for a final GMP, which will be an amount not to exceed $42 million. That amount will be actually tightened up as we move along with the project and get better estimates as to what the final pieces are, but just so everybody's aware that there will be not exceed that dollar amount. And for those of you who will do the math on that, we'll see that basically the total math of all of those GMPs will work out to about $264 million, which is a few million dollars higher than what we're saying is the amount for construction. At this time, right now, we have various deductive change orders in process which bring all of that down, so I don't want anybody to be concerned about that. It's just a normal part of the process. At no time will we ask you to approve anything above the $258 million cumulative total. And as of June 30th, the next slide basically shows you of what we have in project contingencies. Within the $258 million budget, we have roughly $5.4 million of design contingency and $6.4 million of construction contingency. And then outside of that entire budget, we have a separate owner contingency of $5.6 million. When this budget was built, it was estimated that those construction contingencies would be consumed by the time this project was done, because there were numerous unknowns as to that time, and we had various placeholders within the budget for certain things, which I'll touch on briefly on the next slide. As you'll see, 2 slides. And one of the things you've heard a lot about here in this project is that we've basically been able to hit good economic times and going out and handling the biddings and things of that nature. And what we did on this slide was to estimate for you some of those savings that we've had out of the bids to date. And as you can see, the economic times have provided us with some positive bidding, and the amount of these items an amount to about $5.6 million in savings over what the original budgets were and the revised budgets versus the final awards of those contracts. The next slide on there shows you is what we call is, at this point, is what we call as our exposure list. And those are various items which are still being either hashed out or estimated that which are in future GMP packages. Those items that are in yellow there, which basically total out to roughly about $5.8 million, are items that either the oversight committee or the project team have felt strongly enough about to incorporate into the project, and they are being moved ahead with at this point. Part of what we have to take a look at over the next month or so is some of the areas involving the security recommendations and the technology recommendations for 2 of the reports that have come out in the last 30 to 45 days, which basically expose us to increases which would still, even if we covered 100% of those, we would still be within our $258 million. But we also realize that we want to be prudent in what we're approving for this project and take any opportunities we have to return monies back to the general fund out of that $258 million. So part of what we're going to recommend at this point and venture into is that we embark on somewhat of a value engineering process to look at those additional items, decide which ones of those items are important enough to include in the final package. And that is something that the project team will be working on over the next 2 to 4 weeks. The next slide is just kind of give you an idea of the different various financial controls that are in place for this project. We know it's a concern of everybody to ensure that the taxpayer money is spent as efficiently as possible, that we're identifying all of the opportunities to save money, and we're also watching where all the dollars are going on all of the different contracts. So we've basically established multi-layer reviews of the process where we have different people, including the architects, engineers, project management firms, and so on, reviewing the different pay applications. You also have various FMD staff which are involved. You have OMB staff looking at some of these also. And finally, the ultimate controls that we've put in place is by ensuring that we have annual audits of this completed by an outside audit firm to go through all the expenditures and to pull samples and all of that to make sure what we're doing is within what was approved by the board as well as the contract terms.
Question, Jim.
When are we scheduled to conduct the first audit?
The next slide basically shows the first audit has been completed. And basically, we did a calendar year 2008 expenditure review of what we had spent at that point of roughly about $4.5 million in expenditures. Out of that review, basically, the auditors came back and questioned 2 items which amounted to $3,140. Part of that was a prepayment on the mock-up, which slipped by an error, and another one was roughly about $280 item, which was basically paperwork was not completed by the time it was paid out. Both of those 2 items have been resolved at this point, and those audit findings have been rectified.
I guess, Supervisor Brock, I think, had the same kind of question that I did. I think you talked about doing an annual audit.
Yes.
On this by the time you go another year.
The next proposed audit is supposed to start in November of this year. We're working now with internal audit, and they're wrapping up some contractual issues they have with getting the audit firms under contract. As soon as that's resolved, then they will go in and start their audit of all the expenditures up through June 30th of this year, of doing samplings of that, as well as looking at the various procurement pieces we're going to have them look at that have occurred within those time frames.
So I misunderstood you when you said it would be a year before you did another one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. And basically that is the end of my part of the presentation, and now I guess we'll open it up to questions.